Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Just a longtime friend or a great lover. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy it! My name is Alan Harris, and I'm 36 years old. For the past 10 years, I have been working as a network manager for a large insurance company in Cincinnati, Ohio. To be successful in my work, I must be proactive, anticipate, and think logically to solve problems and keep our network up and running. This is very important because the company loses thousands of dollars for every minute the network is down. For the most part, I have been able to apply the skills I learned on the job to the rest of my life. I always try to prevent problems before they arise and think carefully and rationally before reacting to problems that I could not foresee or prevent. This approach to life worked well for me until recently when I faced some challenges that tested my ability to think rationally and respond logically. Although I didn't know it at the time, my problems began last June when I traveled with my family to Paducah, Kentucky for a wedding. Paducah is my wife Tracy's hometown, and the bride was Tracy's cousin. At the wedding, Tracy ran into Jill Tanner, an old school friend of hers, who suggested we meet her and her husband Frank for drinks that evening after the reception. Tracy and I left our 9-year-old son Matthew and 7-year-old daughter Lisa with Tracy's parents and went to meet Tracy's friends. I had never spent much time in Paducah, so Tracy had to show me the way to Brian's Barn, where Jill and Frank were waiting for us. Brian's Barn is not only the name of the establishment but also an apt description. The bar was located in a restored barn. When we entered, we found ourselves in a large room with a round bar in the middle, tables scattered along the outer walls, and a dance floor at one end. There was a band standing against the wall behind the dance floor, but they weren't playing yet when we arrived. Jill and Frank were sitting at a table at the opposite end of the room from the dance floor, and Jill waved to us as we entered. After introducing ourselves, we ordered drinks and started chatting. It turned out that Frank also worked with computer networks, and soon we were exchanging stories about strange and unusual network problems we had encountered over the years. By the time the band started playing, we were so deep in conversation and sitting so close to each other that I didn't notice Tracy and Jill had left the table. It wasn't until I realized my beer was empty and looked up to see if anyone else needed a drink that I noticed the girls were missing. "There are a lot of people our age hanging out here," Frank shouted over the music. Tracy and Jill probably met old friends. Frank and I stood up and walked over to the bar to get another beer, and I noticed Tracy talking to a guy on the other side of the bar. He looked about my height and probably about the same age. I could tell from their expressions that they knew each other. Taking my fresh beer from the bar, I looked back at Tracy. I'm not usually a jealous person and have always trusted Tracy. She never gave me any reason for trust to be an issue. As far as I could tell, there was nothing in her conversation with her friend that would bother me. Frank and I took our beers back to the table and continued talking about broadband content delivery, not exactly a topic that Tracy and Jill would find interesting. About an hour later, Tracy and Jill returned to the table. I knew from the look on Tracy's face that it was time for me to stop chatting and include them in our conversation. The rest of the evening passed very pleasantly. I liked Frank and Jill, and before we left, we invited them to come to Cincinnati for a Reds baseball game. During the drive back to Tracy's parents' house, I asked her about the guy she was talking to. "It was Barry Fox," she said. "He was my friend in high school. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long, but I had fun catching up with friends I haven't seen in years." We told stories about our school days, and they filled me in on many of our other friends. "It's good that you had fun." I was so engrossed in conversation with Frank that I didn't even notice you leave the table. "Aren't Jill and Frank cute?" Tracy asked. "Yes, I really like them," I said. "You know, they got married right after graduation. Everyone said behind their backs that they would get divorced. Nobody thought they would stay together, but 18 years have passed, and Jill told me that they still love each other." "We've been together for 14 years, I said. "Do you still love me?" "You know I do," Tracy said, and then leaned over and kissed me. The next morning, after thanking Tracy's parents for taking us in and watching the kids the previous night, we set off on a 4-hour drive back to Cincinnati. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, I was in my workshop sharpening my lawnmower blade. Tracy had just left to get groceries when the phone rang. Because I need to be available in case of network problems on weekends, I installed a telephone in my workshop so that I can be reached while I'm working around the house. This is in addition to the pager and cell phone. When I picked up on the third ring, my son Matthew said, "Hello?" "Hello, who is this?" the caller asked. "I'm Matthew." "Well, hello, Matthew. Is your mother at home?" I was about to speak but decided to see how my 9-year-old handled this call. "No, sir," he said. "My mother just went to the store. Can I take a message?" I was proud of him. He handled the call exactly as I taught him. "Yes, thank you," the caller said. "I'm an old friend of your mother. My name is Barry. Could you tell her I called?" "Yes, sir." "I'll tell her you called," Matthew said. "Tell your mom that I'll call her at 8 o'clock this evening," the caller said. "I will tell her." "Thank you, Barry." I was surprised by the call. Could this be the same Barry Tracy talked to in Paducah? Why would he call Tracy? I didn't know why, but these questions made my stomach clench slightly. I figured I'd just have to wait for him to call back at 8 o'clock to find out what he wanted. I managed to put these questions out of my head and get back to my business. About half an hour later, having finished working outside, I went into the house to take a shower. After taking a shower and seeing that Tracy wasn't home yet, I let my curiosity about Barry Fox get the better of me and did something I'd never done before. I went into Tracy's closet and found a box where she keeps personal items that have special meaning to her. I had no intention of invading her privacy, I just wanted to find her high school yearbook. I first saw her yearbook when we moved in together during graduate school. It was in the same box full of her personal belongings. She then told me that the things in the box predated our relationship and were important to her, and she would prefer that I not look at her things. But if I insisted, she would tell me what was in there. She said she wasn't trying to hide any secrets from me, just that these things were personal and confidential. I told her I didn't need to see them. After examining the contents of the box, I discovered a stack of letters that I had sent to Tracy the summer after we met. There was an invitation to our wedding, as well as every birthday, anniversary, Valentine's, and Mother's Day card I had ever given her. By the time I got to the bottom of the box, I felt really good. The only thing in the box that had nothing to do with our relationship was Tracy's school yearbook. That day, for the first time in 14 years of our marriage, I looked into the box. It gave me great comfort to know that her school yearbook was the only thing she kept from before we met. I didn't expect her to get rid of her yearbook because I still had mine, but it was really nice to see that everything else that preceded our life together was gone. Opening the book, I turned to Tracy's graduation photo. At 17, she was a very beautiful girl, and in her face, I saw the woman I married. I slowly turned the pages, looking at the notes her friends had written. These were the same entries I would find in my own yearbook. "I will always remember how much fun we had in Mr. Say's class," or "I know we will always be friends." Then I turned the page to look for pictures of students whose last names began with the letter F and found Barry Fox there, next to his photograph. Barry wrote a long note, even though it was written 18 years ago, long before I knew Tracy. His note made me feel uneasy. "My dear Tracy," the note began. "I can't express how much you've meant to me these last 6 months. I'm so in love with you that sometimes I feel like I might explode. Last week, while your parents were out of town, you made me feel like a real man for the first time in my life. You are the only thing on my mind, and I know that I will love you for the rest of my life. I can't wait for summer so we can be together all the time." I didn't have to read the note twice to understand what Barry had written. I had never thought about her previous lovers before. Reading Barry's note made me anxious, but I knew it shouldn't. I felt guilty for invading Tracy's privacy and regretted reading Barry's note. At that moment, I heard Tracy's car pull into the garage, so I quickly placed her yearbook at the bottom of the box and put the box back in place. I made sure I didn't leave any evidence that I had invaded Tracy's privacy and then went down to the garage to help her with the groceries. While we were putting away the groceries, Matthew came into the kitchen, and I realized he was going to tell Tracy about the phone call from Barry. I quickly left the room so I wouldn't be around when Matthew gave Tracy the message from Barry. It was an instinctive decision. I originally planned to be there when she received the message to ask her why he was calling. At the last second, I decided to wait for him to call her and then ask who called and what he wanted. Tracy didn't do anything sneaky or underhanded, so it was hard for me to understand why I reacted the way I did. I didn't know what I was doing, but I decided to let my instincts guide me. When I returned to the kitchen, Tracy was still putting away groceries. She had a strange expression on her face when she looked at me. "Where did you disappear so suddenly?" she asked. "I needed to go to the toilet," Matthew said. "Someone named Barry called me and said he would call me back at 8 o'clock, Tracy said. "Do you know anything about this?" "No, when did he call?" Matthew said. "At 3 o'clock. Matthew is very good at taking messages, isn't he?" I said, trying to hide my discomfort. I wondered if Matthew had told his mother that Barry said he was an old friend of hers, or if she thought it might be some other person named Barry. I found it hard to believe that she didn't know it was her friend Barry calling. It would be too much of a coincidence for it to be anyone else. "What do you think he wants?" I said. "Probably someone collecting money for charity or another one of those calls asking for a credit card," Tracy said. Tracy looked a little awkward when she said this, and I was becoming more and more tense by the minute. Tracy was honest with me about the phone message, but not completely. She didn't admit that it was her friend Barry from Paducah who called. This made me change my plans. Now I wanted to hear that phone call when it happened. "Perhaps you're right," I said. "Lately, we have been receiving a lot of offers for credit cards." For the rest of the day, Tracy was silent and looked a little worried. That evening at dinner, she hardly looked at me and seemed to focus all her attention on Matthew and Lisa. I started to feel like I had done something wrong and Tracy was mad at me, but I knew that wasn't the case. At 7:30 p.m., I told Tracy that I had taken the lawnmower apart and was going to the shop to put it back together so I could mow the lawn on Sunday. A look of relief appeared on Tracy's face. I wasn't in the house when Barry called back at 8 o'clock. I guessed that Tracy was glad that I would be in the workshop when he called, not even suspecting that I was planning to listen to the call. It was 8:10 when the phone finally rang. I waited until the light on the phone turned on, indicating that the line was active, and then I picked up the handset and simultaneously pressed the mute button. "Hello, Tracy?" I said. "Yes, hello. This is Barry. How are you?" "Hello, Barry. I'm fine." "It's a surprise," Tracy said. "I hope it's a nice one," Barry said. Tracy didn't comment. "I just wanted to call and tell you how glad I was to see you after all these years," Barry said. "I was glad to see you too. When I got home and told Karen I saw you, she was angry that she missed you. She asked me to tell you to call her next time you're in Paducah. I wish Karen were there." "I'd love to see her," Tracy said. I started to feel better. The call seemed innocent enough. "I'm glad Karen wasn't there," Barry said. "I wouldn't be able to dance with you like that if my wife were there." "What dance?" Alarm bells started ringing in my head. "We shouldn't have danced like that." "My husband was on the other side of the room and could easily see us," Tracy said. "You didn't seem to mind." "At that moment, I had drunk too much," Tracy said. I wondered what the hell they were doing on the dance floor. Tracy never even mentioned dancing that night. After that, the call turned into a regular conversation between friends. I didn't know what to think about what I heard, but I decided that no matter what happened that evening, I wouldn't let it become a problem. I thought the conversation was almost over when another surprise awaited me. "Tracy, my sales territory has changed, and now I will come to Cincinnati several times a year. I'm expecting to arrive in about 3 weeks, and I was wondering if I could take you to dinner when I'm in town," Barry said. Tracy was silent for a moment and then said, "I'm not sure Alan would be comfortable going to dinner with one of my old boyfriends." "One of your old boyfriends?" Barry said. "I hope I wasn't just one of your old boys, anyway. I wasn't planning on inviting your husband to come with us." "I can't go to dinner with you," Tracy said. "Why isn't it obvious? We're both married, and I don't go on dates with anyone other than my husband." I was glad to hear this from her. "It's just a dinner between old friends, nothing special." "When we were talking in the barn, I got the feeling that you wanted more time to talk," Barry said. "I really wanted to find out what happened to a few more of our old friends." "Okay, then we'll have dinner, and I'll tell you about what's going on with all your old friends in Paducah," Tracy said. "Just dinner and conversation?" Tracy's question alarmed me greatly. It sounded like Tracy was really considering his invitation. Yes, dinner and conversation, and then we'll see what happens next, Barry said. At that moment, I wanted to scream into the phone, but I didn't. I don't think that's a good idea, Tracy said. Listen, Tracy, I wouldn't have asked to meet you if your kiss hadn't told me that you shared my desire. Barry, do not say that. It was just a friendly kiss, so don't read anything like that into it. The knots in my stomach were getting tighter. Tracy seemed to resist Barry, but she wasn't firm enough to convince him, or me, that she wasn't interested in inviting him. I'll give you time to think about it and call you again when I know exactly when I'll be in Cincinnati, Barry said. No, you can't call me. Why? Alan will be suspicious of these calls, and I don't know how I will explain this to him. Well, then, what is your number at work? I can't have you calling me at work. I felt like Tracy was completely blowing Barry off. She was basically telling him not to call her anymore. Can I send you an email? Asked Barry. Yes, it's better this way, Tracy said. I listened to her give him her email address and felt like I was going to throw up. Fine, look for my email next week. Tracy, you know that I still love you. Don't say that, Barry. This was the end of the conversation. I was so upset that I had to take a walk around the block to get some fresh air into my lungs and clear my head. As I began to reconsider what I had heard, I tried to find meaning in it. I just heard my wife's ex-lover ask her to have an affair with him. Tracy might like to believe it was just an invitation to dinner, but she had to know there was more to it than that. Barry said he would visit Cincinnati several times a year, which indicated to me that he was contemplating a long-term affair with my wife. This meant that if he failed to get Tracy into bed on the first visit, he would try again the next time. I tried to make sense of all this information but was too emotional to come to any conclusions. Every time I started thinking about what could happen, I got angry. I had to talk to myself, saying things like, if she sleeps with him, I'll throw her fifth place out on the street and beat the crap out of him. No rational thoughts, just emotions, and mostly it was anger. By the time I got home, I had calmed down enough that I felt in control enough to go into the house and meet Tracy without exploding. In the end, she still didn't do anything. I decided that I would spy on her email and wait to see if there was any real problem. Maybe after Barry sends her a letter, she'll have time to think about what's going on and tell him she won't see him. When I entered the house, Tracy looked at me cheerfully for a minute and then asked, "Where have you been?" "I went to your workshop, but you weren't there." I was restless, and it was a beautiful night, so I took a walk around the block. "Are you still uneasy?" "I don't know, but what if?" "Let's walk around the block again, and this time I'll go with you," Tracy said. I wasn't sure I wanted to be in a situation where I had to talk to Tracy. "I don't think we should leave children at home alone, you're probably right." Without another word, I walked past Tracy into the living room. Having sat down, I turned on the TV and for the next hour and a half, I didn't say a word. At 11 o'clock, I turned off the TV and went to bed. Tracy watched TV with me and, without saying a word, followed me to bed. I made a mental note that we both seemed lost in our own thoughts. In our bedroom, I undressed, put on the boxer shorts and t-shirt that I preferred to wear in the summer, and slipped into bed. When Tracy got into bed, I rolled over onto my side, facing away from her. I probably lay there for about 15 minutes, trying to fall asleep, but fragments of Tracy's conversation with Barry kept replaying in my head. "Yes, dinner and conversation, and then we'll see what happens next," Barry said. At that moment, I wanted to scream into the phone, but I didn't. "I don't think that's a good idea, Tracy," I said. "Listen, Tracy, I wouldn't have asked to meet you if your kiss hadn't told me that you shared my desire," Barry insisted. "Do not say that. It was just a friendly kiss, so don't read anything like that into it," Tracy replied. The knots in my stomach were getting tighter. Tracy seemed to resist Barry, but she wasn't firm enough to convince him, or me, that she wasn't interested in inviting him. "I'll give you time to think about it and call you again when I know exactly when I'll be in Cincinnati," Barry said. "No, you can't call me. Alan will be suspicious of these calls, and I don't know how I will explain this to him." "Well, then what is your number at work?" Barry asked. "I can't have you calling me at work," Tracy insisted. I felt like Tracy was completely blowing Barry off. She was basically telling him not to call her anymore. "Can I send you an email?" asked Barry. "Yes, it's better this way," Tracy said. I listened to her give him her email address and felt like I was going to throw up. "Fine, look for my email next week, Tracy." "You know that I still love you," Barry concluded. "Don't say that, Barry," Tracy responded firmly. This was the end of the conversation. I was so upset that I had to take a walk around the block to get some fresh air into my lungs and clear my head. As I began to reconsider what I had heard, I tried to find meaning in it. I had just heard my wife's ex-lover ask her to have an affair with him. Tracy might like to believe it was just an invitation to dinner, but she had to know there was more to it than that. Barry said he would visit Cincinnati several times a year, which indicated to me that he was contemplating a long-term affair with my wife. This meant that if he failed to get Tracy into bed on the first visit, he would try again the next time. I tried to make sense of all this information but was too emotional to come to any conclusions. Every time I started thinking about what could happen, I got angry. I had to talk to myself, saying things like, "If she sleeps with him, I'll throw her out on the street and beat the crap out of him." No rational thoughts, just emotions, and mostly anger. By the time I got home, I had calmed down enough to feel in control, enough to go into the house and meet Tracy without exploding. In the end, she still didn't do anything. I decided that I would spy on her email and wait to see if there was any real problem. Maybe after Barry sends her a letter, she'll have time to think about what's going on and tell him she won't see him. When I entered the house, Tracy looked at me cheerfully for a minute and then asked, "Where have you been?" "I went to your workshop, but you weren't there." I was restless, and it was a beautiful night, so I took a walk around the block. "Are you still uneasy?" Tracy asked. "I don't know. But what if you want? Let's walk around the block again, and this time I'll go with you," Tracy said. I wasn't sure I wanted to be in a situation where I had to talk to Tracy. "I don't think we should leave children at home alone," I said. "You're probably right." Without another word, I walked past Tracy into the living room. Having sat down, I turned on the TV, and for the next hour and a half, I didn't say a word. At 11 o'clock, I turned off the TV and went to bed. Tracy watched TV with me and, without saying a word, followed me to bed. I made a mental note that we both seemed lost in our own thoughts. In our bedroom, I undressed, put on the boxer shorts and t-shirt that I preferred to wear in the summer, and slipped into bed. When Tracy got into bed, I rolled over onto my side, facing away from her. I probably lay there for about 15 minutes, trying to fall asleep, but fragments of Tracy's conversation with Barry kept replaying in my head. "I'm glad Karen wasn't there. I wouldn't have been able to dance with you like that if my wife had been there. Now I'll come to Cincinnati several times a year." "I wasn't planning on inviting your husband to come with us," Barry replied when Tracy asked. "Just dinner and conversation?" Barry replied. "Dinner and conversation, then we'll see what else happens," Barry replied. "Listen, Tracy, I wouldn't have asked to meet you if your kiss hadn't told me that you shared my desire." All this was spinning in my head when I suddenly felt Tracy press against my back. She reached her hand up and started playing with my hair. "Are you awake?" she asked. And I almost didn't answer. "Yes." "Do you know how much I love you?" Tracy asked. This question made me so angry that I wanted to say "as much as you love Barry," but I didn't say that. "No, I really don't know," I said. I could tell by the way Tracy's body tensed that she wasn't expecting that answer. "How can you not know?" she asked. "Isn't it obvious to you that I love you more than anything in the world, with the possible exception of Matthew and Lisa?" With this revelation, I almost pounced on her. I wanted to say, "If you love me so much, why did you kiss Barry that night? If you love me so much, why are you thinking about having an affair with him when he comes to Cincinnati?" But I didn't say anything. Tracy leaned on her elbow and looked at me. "I love you," for the first time in my life. I was angry when I heard Tracy tell me she loved me that night. I discovered that anger and excitement are an interesting combination. The next day at work, I hacked Tracy's email password, which wasn't very difficult, as the password she used was Matthew's initials and Lisa's date of birth. This was only the third password I've tried. I then installed MSN Instant Messaging on my work computer using Tracy's email address so that I would be notified every time she received an email. Unfortunately, I couldn't look at her email until I was sure it wasn't open. Luckily, Tracy only had access to email during the day using her computer at work. She didn't have a computer at home, and she never used mine. Tracy didn't really like computers and mostly only used email to communicate with friends around town. Even then, she didn't send or receive many messages. That first week, Tracy received 7 letters, 4 of which were from Sue Baxter. They used to work together, but now they communicate by email. They enjoyed sharing recipes, which is what they did this week. The other 3 notes also had no meaning. It wasn't until Tuesday of the following week that Tracy received her first note from Barry. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was talking to Tracy on the phone about how she wanted me to stop by the store on the way home. Suddenly, I heard a ping, and in the lower right corner of my screen, a small window appeared with the inscription, "You have received an email from foxmanxx.com." It was difficult to keep the pain I suddenly felt in my chest from showing in my voice as I continued to talk to Tracy. I waited until a few minutes past 5 o'clock and then called Tracy's work phone to make sure she had already finished her workday. Once I was sure Tracy had gone home, I opened her email account and found a note from Barry. I was afraid that she would read it and then erase it, but she didn't. "Hi Tracy, just wanted to let you know that I'll be in Cincinnati next Monday. I'll be staying at the Marriott downtown, and I'd love for you to have dinner with me. Love, Barry." I had to look in Tracy's sent mail folder to find the reply she sent him. Before I had time to open this note, my heart began to pound in my chest. I was scared of what I would find in her note, but I had to look. "Barry, I'd like to see you again, but only for dinner. I don't want you to expect more. Tracy." There was no comfort in this note for me. Although she told him that he shouldn't expect more than just dinner with her, she left open the possibility of more when she accepted his invitation. She also didn't tell Barry that there wouldn't be anything more than dinner. She only told him not to expect anything more than dinner. I'm sure Barry took that note as a positive response, just as I took it as a negative response. From that evening, the relationship between Tracy and I began to deteriorate. When I got home, I was angry at Tracy, but I couldn't tell her why, so I tried to pretend that everything was fine. It was obvious from Tracy that she had something on her mind that she wasn't going to share with me, so we were both very quiet that night. Tracy tried to initiate physical relations, but I pretended to be asleep and did not respond to her. The next morning at breakfast, Tracy was silent, but I had the feeling that she wanted to tell me something but did not say it. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door as soon as I finished eating. Usually, I didn't get ready for work for another hour, but this morning I just wanted to get out of the house. I was surprised that Tracy didn't ask me why I was leaving so early. As I approached the door, Tracy began to speak, "I love you," but I closed the door behind me before she could say that. "I love you" is what Tracy has told me as I leave for work every morning since we got married, and that morning I just didn't want to hear it. That day, Tracy did not call me at work, as she did almost every day. This was a sign to me that Tracy didn't think about me the same way she used to. By the end of that day, I saw that Tracy's email had received 4 notes, all from Barry. I waited until 5 o'clock again to check Tracy's email. The first note from Barry simply told Tracy that he had made dinner reservations for 7:30 Tuesday night and told her he would meet her at the Marriott bar at 7 o'clock. Tracy's response said she wasn't sure if she could come, which gave me some hope. "You have to come," Barry's next note read. "We have to find out if there's magic between us. If there's nothing there, at least we'll both know. Isn't it better to know than to guess and then maybe regret that we never tried to find out? Please come." Tracy replied, "I will come, but you must understand that this is only dinner and nothing more. We are both married and should not look for any magic." Then Barry replied, "Great. I'm really looking forward to meeting you. It will make coming to Cincinnati on business that much more worthwhile." Tracy wrote back, "I'm looking forward to meeting you too, but you have to remember what I said." Barry's last note read, "Don't worry, I won't pressure you. I would never force you to do anything you don't want." This last note made me very angry. Barry essentially said that he planned to seduce her but only with her consent. Not in those words, of course, but there was a hidden meaning in it. I doubted Tracy would have understood the same meaning. I sat at my desk for another hour trying to figure out what Tracy was thinking. Either she's just bored and wants some excitement, or she's really obsessed with this guy. Is she going to have an affair with him? What should I do if she has an affair? The thought flashed through my mind about what I would do if Tracy ended up in bed with him. I had to calm myself down and think. What would be the best thing that could happen? It was easy. Tracy would change her mind and tell Barry that she didn't want to see him now or ever again. In the worst-case scenario, Tracy would have an affair with Barry and then tell me that she is in love with him and wants a divorce. I doubted any of this would happen. Whatever happens, it will be something in between. I tried to imagine how I would handle each option: a one-time fling, a short affair lasting only a few months, or a long-term affair lasting more than a year. I was in such emotional turmoil that I couldn't make any rational decisions about any of these possibilities. On the way home that evening, I decided to try to be very loving towards Tracy. Maybe I can convince her not to meet Barry at the Marriott on Tuesday. When I got home, I heard Tracy in the kitchen preparing dinner. I went into the kitchen with the thought of kissing Tracy and telling her I loved her. But when I walked into the kitchen, she turned away from me and didn't even notice my presence. I changed tactics and simply greeted her as I walked out of the kitchen. She weakly greeted me back. At dinner, Tracy said almost nothing to me and didn't look at me when she spoke. However, she was talking to Matthew and Lisa and smiling at them, so her problem seemed directed at me. That evening, Tracy tried to initiate physical relations again after we went to bed. She waited until we were both in bed and the lights were off. I just turned away from her and said I didn't feel well. There was no mood for intimacy with her, knowing that she had a date with Barry on Thursday morning. As I left the house for work, Tracy didn't even bother to tell me she loved me. A couple of days before, I didn't want to hear it, but now it really hurt not to hear it. There were no more notes from Barry that day. I waited until 5 o'clock to see if Tracy had sent a note to Barry in hopes of canceling their date, but she hadn't sent him a note. On Thursday evening, everything was the same. Tracy couldn't look at me when she talked to me and tried to initiate physical contact again when we got into bed. Again, I turned her down, and she wanted to know what was wrong with me. She asked why I didn't want to have a night with her. For more than a week now, I've been getting the clear impression that I'm not as important to you as before, I said. You rarely talk to me, and when you do, you can't look at me. But as soon as we're in bed, you want me to make love to you. Well, I haven't been feeling any love lately, so I'm not giving it. When you're ready to talk and tell me what's going on between us, maybe then we can start having intimate again. I waited for an answer from Tracy, but she simply turned away from me and remained silent. I don't think Tracy slept well that night because I didn't sleep much at all, and I could feel how restless she was. On Friday morning, Tracy stood in front of me as I was leaving the house, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I love you." I looked into her eyes for a moment. "I really hope you love me," I said and left. I spent the first 2 hours of Friday morning sitting in my office, trying to decide what to do about the possible consequences of Tracy's date with Barry. My stomach was in knots, and my head was spinning. I spent a lot of time thinking about the problem but making no progress. Then I started remembering all the stories about cheating wives I had read online over the years. I remembered one theme that seemed to run through many of these stories. The husband found out that his wife was cheating on him or was going to cheat on him and did nothing, preferring to wait for evidence of her infidelity, which he could use against her to take revenge. I didn't want to think about revenge. I just wanted my marriage to be like it was before Barry Fox came along. Besides, how was I going to get proof that Tracy had a night with him? I was thinking about this when I was suddenly pulled out of my thoughts by the phone ringing. It was one of my colleagues asking about a problem he was facing online. He told me that next week we might have problems with the network segment because our marketing team was about to launch online video streaming. He said he believed that the high volume of traffic would cause an outage in this segment of the network and wanted to know what to do in that case. I told him that we needed to be proactive and prevent the problem from happening. Let's redistribute traffic on the network so that all streaming video doesn't overload one network segment. This way, we'll have enough bandwidth to handle the increased traffic. The answer was quite simple, and when I hung up, I came up with a plan to solve my personal problem. I began to look at my problem from a different perspective. Instead of trying to figure out what I would do if and when Tracy had an affair with Barry, I started working on how to prevent it from happening. My first thought was to talk to Barry's wife. I thought I could ask her to call Tracy, and maybe that would make Tracy feel guilty about what she was doing. Another possibility was to simply tell Karen what her husband was up to and hope that she could stop Barry's plans. Instead of using the directory and trying to find Karen and Barry's home number, I decided to call someone who knew them. "Hello, Frank," I said when Alan Harris answered the phone. "How are you?" "Hey, Alan, I'm fine. Glad to hear from you. How are you?" I didn't want to get into the real reason for my call right away, so I told Frank and Jill about our invitation for them to join us at the game. "I was just looking at the sports page in the newspaper," I said. "I read about the Reds game yesterday and thought about you and Jill. I decided to call you and see if you're still thinking of coming to visit us for the weekend to watch the game." "Yes, we would really like to. We'll probably only be able to come in August or September. I'll send you the home schedule so you know which weekend the Reds will be in town." "That's great. Is it okay if we bring our son? I know he'll enjoy watching the game." "Certainly." The invitation was for the whole family, I said. "While you're on the phone, can I ask you to do me a little favor?" "Certainly. What do you need?" "Do you know Barry and Karen Fox?" I asked. "Yes, I know Barry. He works for the same company as me," Frank said. "Do you happen to know their phone number?" "Tracy would like to call Karen. I think they were good friends in school, and Tracy was disappointed that she couldn't see her while we were in Paducah. I can give you Barry's phone number. He and Karen divorced about 5 years ago. Karen remarried and moved to St. Louis," Frank said. "Do you know why they got divorced?" I asked. I would like to be able to tell Tracy. Barry was playing the fool. He had 2 or 3 girlfriends at the same time. How long did it take Karen to find out what he was doing? Frank explained. It took her about 6 years. Barry had girlfriends in other cities, Bowling Green, Louisville, and Evansville. He told Karen he needed to go to one of his girlfriend's cities on business and stayed for a day or 2 with his girlfriend. How did Karen find out about this? I asked. One day she ran into his boss and found out that his job did not require travel. He's not a salesman. The only thing Barry Fox sells is crap. He works in a warehouse. He's an assistant manager and works a lot of overtime. But because he's in a management position, he's not paid for overtime. Instead, the company gives him comp time. So, if he works on the weekend, he can take Monday and Tuesday off, and then he travels. Was Barry remarried? No, but he still has a few girlfriends scattered within a few hours' drive of Paducah, Frank said. Tracy will be shocked by this information, I said. Frank and I chatted for a few more minutes, and then ended the call. After the conversation, I knew enough about Barry to lose interest in him. I spent another hour thinking about how to present this information to Tracy. I was sure that once Tracy found out the truth about Barry, that he was lying about his wife Karen, that he was lying about his business trip to Cincinnati, and once she found out about his other girlfriends, I thought she would lose interest in him very quickly. I was about to go home and dump all this information on Tracy when another thought occurred to me. I have no doubt that this information will put an end to her interest in him. I will get my wife back, not because she chose me over Barry, but because she has learned that Barry is not the man she thought he was. Thinking calmly and rationally, I realized that I had to force Tracy to make a choice between our marriage and the Barry she thought she knew, rather than the womanizer he really was. These arguments may seem stupid, but at that moment, that's what I thought. When I got home that evening, I tried to be friendly and considerate to Tracy, letting her know in subtle ways that I loved her. But when we got into bed, I rolled over and fell asleep. Saturday and Sunday were very difficult for me. Even though I tried to act like everything was fine, Tracy still didn't look at me when she talked to me. This hurt me deeply. Does she really dislike me so much that she won't even look at me? Monday was much better. It was a very busy day at work, which made time fly by quickly. I felt relieved knowing that by the end of the next day, I would have some kind of decision. When I got home from work on Monday night, I tried to act happy and asked Tracy about her day. I also tried to gently bring up my concerns. Lately, it seems to me that we're drifting apart, I said. Maybe a little romance is all we need. I was thinking that maybe tomorrow night we could go out for a romantic dinner and then come home and make love. What do you think? Tomorrow evening doesn't suit me, she said. Tomorrow after work, I'm going to have dinner and drinks with my girlfriends. Maybe we can have dinner later in the week. Like this, I was wondering when and how she was going to do it. What a cliché, going somewhere with the girls. Suddenly, I felt like a character in a story about my wife cheating on me. I think our marriage is more important than going out with friends, don't you? I said. Our marriage? Well, sure, but we made these plans last week, and it would be difficult if everyone had to change their plans now. Not everyone should change their plans, only you need to change your plans, I said. Alan, please, can't we just go to dinner another time? Tracy begged. Well, at least I tried, I said. I think if you're going somewhere, then tomorrow I'll work late to have time to do a few things at the office. Can you ask Sarah to come and babysit until you get home? I think I can call Sarah, but I don't know what time I'll get home. We could do something there after dinner, she said. What are you going to do after dinner? Go and pick up some. I asked sarcastically. Tracy turned her back to me and didn't answer. She didn't take the bait, she didn't defend herself or back down. I began to think that our marriage was in more trouble than I thought. Later in the evening, we both sat and watched TV without ever speaking to each other. At 11 o'clock, Tracy got up to go to bed. When I did not immediately follow her, she returned to the room. Are you getting up? She asked. Not yet. I think I'll watch some Letterman tonight. Can't you get up now? I don't like sleeping without you, she said. Perhaps you should get used to it, I said. What does that mean? Are you trying to tell me something? She asked. No, just giving you something to think about. Good night. Tracy stood in the doorway for another minute and looked at me. She seemed upset but didn't say anything more. Finally, she turned and went to bed. When I got into bed about an hour later, Tracy was either asleep or faking sleep very well. I changed for bed, lay down next to Tracy, and tried to sleep. Lying on my side, I was thinking about what might happen the next evening when Tracy stirred. I lay still and began to breathe slowly and deeply so that if Tracy woke up, she would think I was sleeping. Alan, Tracy whispered. When I didn't answer, she repeated my name a little louder. Alan. I didn't move. I love you, she whispered and then rolled away from me. I wondered what it meant. She accepted Barry's invitation to dinner and conversation, and then we'll see what happens. It was a date that could end our marriage, and here she is whispering about her love for me. At that moment, I was so angry that I wanted to shake her and shout, "What the hell are you thinking about?" Instead, I continued to pretend to be asleep. On Tuesday morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock, got up, took a shower, went downstairs, and made coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen counter drinking coffee when I heard Tracy step into the shower. At that moment, I knew I didn't want to see her this morning, so I quickly finished my coffee and left the house. I went to the diner for breakfast and then headed to work. All day, I tried to keep myself busy so as not to think about what I had to do that evening. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Tracy called me. When I heard her voice, I prayed that she would call to tell me that she had changed her mind and decided to go to dinner with me. Alan, I just wanted to let you know that tonight I asked Sarah to babysit, she said. I told her you'd probably be home first, but I didn't know what time it would be. Sarah replied that since it's a school night, she had to be home by 10 o'clock. You'll be home by 10 o'clock, right? Yes, I'll be home until 10 o'clock, and you should be there too, I said. When Tracy didn't comment, I said, I'm busy right now. See you later, and hung up without giving her the opportunity to say anything else. At 5 o'clock, I had already started to clear the table when the phone rang. Automatically, I reached for the phone but didn't pick up. I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone, and phone calls at this time of day usually meant trouble. The last thing I needed was another problem. A few minutes later, my mobile phone rang. I didn't even look at my phone when I turned it off. I knew that if I saw who was calling, it would be harder to ignore the call. That evening, I stayed in the office until 5:30 p.m. and then walked the 4 blocks from the office to the Marriott Hotel. Entering the hotel, I was surprised at my calmness. As I walked through the lobby, I heard someone say, "Alan." I turned to see who said it and if they were talking to me. Only a moment later did I realize that the woman standing behind the hotel reception was waving at me. Then I recognized her face. As I approached the counter, I couldn't help but smile. "Jackie Washington, how are you?" I said, walking up to the counter. "Jackie Winters now. How are you doing, Alan?" "I haven't seen you for 8 years," she said with a smile. "I don't want to think about how much time has passed, except to say that it's been too much time. I had no idea you worked here." "I see you're the hotel manager. How long have you been working here?" I asked. "Yes, I've been working at this hotel for 2 years. I started as a management trainee at the Marriott in Lexington 5 years ago. I was the assistant manager there until I got promoted and transferred here," Jackie said. "I'm impressed. Now I work just 4 blocks from here. Maybe we can have lunch sometime," I suggested. "I would love to, but I'm not sure my husband will appreciate it," Jackie replied. "Trust me, I can understand that," I said. "Why don't you give me your home number? I'll call you, and we can all go out to dinner sometime. I would like to meet the person who finally won your heart." As soon as I said that, I felt a pain in my chest as I wondered if Tracy and I would still be together the next time I talked to Jackie. After writing her number on a piece of paper and handing it to me, Jackie asked, "How's Tracy?" "I think she's fine, but that remains to be seen," I said. "What's happened? Do you have a problem that you wouldn't like to talk about right now? I'm here today to see if I can fix it. I hope everything works out for you. I know I shouldn't ask you this, but could you check something for me?" I asked. "What would you like me to check?" "Could you check if Barry Fox is registered here?" "What are you going to do with Mr. Fox if he's here?" asked Jackie. "Nothing. I just need to know if he's registered here," I replied. Jackie pressed a few buttons on her computer and looked at me. "Mr. Fox checked in about an hour ago," she said. "Thank you, Jackie. I hope someday you'll tell me what it was. It depends on how everything turns out. If everything goes the way I hope, I will never talk about it to anyone. If things go badly, I might need someone to talk to," I said. Someone came over to talk to Jackie, and I said I had to go. I promised to call her to arrange dinner and then walked toward the bar. I looked at my watch. It was 5:15 p.m. I had an hour and 45 minutes before Tracy was due to meet Barry at the bar. I looked around to find a place where I could discreetly observe Tracy's arrival. I found what I was looking for at the back of the bar near the door leading to the lounges. There, I could sit at the bar and watch the rest of the room. If Tracy needed to go to the ladies' room, I could move around the corner of the bar and stay out of sight until the right moment. With that part of my plan decided, I took a walk outside the hotel to kill some more time and think about what I was going to say to Tracy later. I knew I wouldn't be able to memorize the speech, and a rehearsed speech would probably be inappropriate, but I tried to make sure that all the points I wanted to convey were clearly outlined in my head. This way, I could let the conversation flow more naturally and prevent myself from getting tongue-tied if something unexpected happened. By 6 o'clock, I was starting to get nervous and decided I needed a drink to calm my nerves. But before returning to the bar, I called home on my cell phone. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Hello, Sarah, this is Mr. Harris. I just wanted to check if everything was okay." "Everything is fine here," she said. "Did my wife by any chance tell you when she expects to return home this evening?" "No, but she knows that I have to leave by 10 o'clock, she replied. She looked great when she left. She was wearing a nicely little dress, and her hair was beautifully styled. I hope I'll be like her when I get older. This was not what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Sarah. I'll be home by 10 o'clock, so if Tracy wore a little dress like Sarah said, I'm guessing she decided this date was going to be more than just dinner and conversation. At this point, I became an emotional mess. I was depressed and angry. My depression made me want to go somewhere and lie down, and I almost decided to just go home and go to bed. But my anger wouldn't let me do that. I wandered around the hotel for some time until I got my emotions under control. At 6:15, I sat down at the bar at the Marriott, ordered a bourbon and water, and prepared to wait. I was about halfway through my first drink when a man walked up to the bar next to me and ordered a draft beer. I didn't look at him until he took the beer and walked slowly around the bar. Then I watched him as he walked to a table in a dark corner of the room and then returned to the bar and engaged in a short conversation with the bartender, which ended with him handing the bartender a $10 bill. A few minutes after this conversation, the bartender approached the table and hung a sign on it, "Reserved." At first, I didn't think anything of it, but when the man came up to the bar again and walked towards me, I recognized him. I had only seen him once, but I knew it was Barry. So Barry was preparing everything to seduce my wife. What happened next would have been almost comical if I hadn't been so upset. Barry came and sat next to me and ordered another beer. After he took his first sip of the fresh beer, he turned to me. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" he asked. I wanted to hit him, but I didn't. "Yeah, it's a beautiful day," I said, "and it makes me wonder what the hell I'm doing here instead of enjoying the day outside." I could not believe it. Barry actually started making small talk with me. We talked about the Reds and their chances of winning the pennant. He told me that being from Paducah, Kentucky, he was more of a St. Louis Cardinals fan, so we talked a little about the Cardinals' chances. At 6:45, Barry said, "I need to run to my room and get ready for the date. In 15 minutes, a hot thing will meet me." I usually like to let them wait a few minutes before I arrive. This usually makes them happier to see me when I show up. "It was nice to chat," Barry said. He stood up and left without introducing himself to me. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Tracy entered the bar. It was bad enough that she showed up at all, but she still looked so beautiful. Sarah was right. Tracy was wearing a short black cocktail dress with black stockings, which I suspected were not pantyhose but thigh-high stockings. The top of the dress showed just enough cleavage to be cute without being too revealing. The soft light in the room seemed to add shine to her long, dark hair and make her face even more beautiful than usual. Seeing her dressed like that for another man was extremely painful. I had to take a few deep breaths to calm down. Tracy looked around the room for a few minutes, then walked to the other side of the bar and spoke to the bartender. I saw him point his finger, and then Tracy walked over to the reserved table and sat down. I could tell Tracy was nervous because over the next 5 minutes, she took her makeup bag out of her purse 3 times to check her face. Each time she put it away, she looked around the bar as if checking to see if anyone there might know her. Every time she glanced in my direction, I managed to dodge her gaze. It was 7:05 when Barry finally entered the bar and joined Tracy at the table. Barry leaned in to kiss Tracy before sitting down. I watched their conversation, and it was obvious that Tracy was still either very nervous or just feeling awkward. She continued fiddling with her hands, placing them on the table, then under the table, one on top, one on the bottom, and then started all over again. She was still fidgeting when the waitress brought them their drinks. For my part, I was becoming more and more nervous by the minute. My stomach was churning, and my palms were sweating. I was trying to decide when I should make my move, but in fact, the decision was made for me. Seeing Barry get up, I thought they were going to go into the restaurant, so I started to get up, thinking I wanted to get to Tracy before they entered the restaurant. But Tracy didn't get up. Barry left the table and walked toward the bar, and then came up to me. I wondered if he had finally recognized me or if Tracy had noticed me. Would this be a showdown between me and Barry? As Barry approached my side of the bar, he looked at me, nodded his head in a friendly manner, and walked out the doorway behind me. I turned to see where he was going and saw him enter the men's room. I immediately stood up, walked around the bar, and headed towards where Tracy was sitting. She looked at herself again in the compact mirror and did not notice my approach. "Hello, Tracy." Tracy nearly jumped out of her seat when she looked up and saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I decided to come in and say hello to you and your friends. I just thought that since you think having dinner and drinks with them is more important than having dinner with me tonight, I'd like to meet these friends of yours," I said. Tracy's face turned completely white. I saw her eyes move towards the bar to see if Barry had returned from the lounge. Tracy was starting to look really uneasy. "Why didn't you call?" Tracy began to speak, but I interrupted her. "Should I call you to let you know I'm stopping by?" Why did I have to do that? Please leave before my friends come, she said. Your presence here puts me in an awkward position. I could hear the panic in her voice as she spoke. Why such a rush? Can't I sit here and have a drink with you? I asked. I could see she was trying to think of something to say to get me to leave before Barry returned. Suddenly, Tracy's eyes widened, and I realized Barry must already be returning to the table. Hey guys, she's with me, Barry's voice came from behind me. Is he bothering you, Tracy? Barry asked. When I turned to face him, he smiled. It's you. Sorry, but she's already occupied. I told you I have a hot date tonight. That's right, Barry. How do you know my name? I asked. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alan Harris, like Mr. Harris to Mrs. Harris. Barry took a couple of steps back. Sorry, guy, I didn't know, he said. Didn't know what? That she was married or that I'm a wimp who should have stayed home taking care of our kids while you seduced my wife? I asked. I looked at Tracy, but she looked almost paralyzed, so I looked back at Barry. Why don't we sit down and talk? I said in such a calm voice that even I was surprised. Look, I don't want any trouble. I'll just leave and let you two sort it out, Barry said. Barry, stop worrying so much. There won't be any trouble today, so just sit down, I said. Barry sat down, and I pulled up a chair from a nearby table and sat down. Tracy finally tried to speak. Alan, it's not what you think, she said. I put my finger to my lips to quiet her. Tracy, I don't know what to think about this. I only know it's not appropriate for a married woman to go on a date with her former lover. Tracy tried to speak again, but I raised my finger again. I know what you're going to say, that it was just dinner between two old friends. I just can't accept that explanation. If that were true, I would have been invited to dinner with you too, and you wouldn't have lied and said you were going out with your girlfriends. And if it really was just dinner and conversation, you definitely wouldn't have dressed like that. I have to say, you look beautiful, and it really upsets me to think you dressed like that for another man. Barry tried to speak in Tracy's defense. That's how it was. I was just in town for the night and didn't want to dine alone. There was nothing more to it, he said. I laughed at him. You didn't come all the way from Paducah to Cincinnati and pay $200 for a hotel room just to have dinner with my wife, I said. You had to come on business, so you called Tracy. I cut him off before he could finish his lie. Barry, we both know that's not true. Assistant warehouse managers don't go on business trips, do they? Barry sat back in his seat and said nothing. Tracy hadn't looked at Barry since he arrived at the table. She looked either at me or at her hands. In a very low and calm voice, I began to tell Tracy why I came here. Tracy, when I first found out about your date, I was sure you would never go through with it. I was sure you loved me and would never hurt me like this. But over the past 2 weeks, I began to doubt your feelings for me. You hardly talked to me, and when you did, you couldn't look me in the eyes. I don't know if it was because you couldn't look at me anymore or if you were afraid the expression on your face would tell me you didn't care about me anymore. Tracy grabbed my hand and started to open her mouth to speak, but I stopped her again. Let me finish what I came here to do. I couldn't understand how you could ignore me during the day, but as soon as the lights went out, you were ready to make love to me. Then I wondered if you really wanted to make love to me or if I was just there to fulfill the physical part of some intimate fantasy you were playing out in your head. Have you thought about this, Barry? I pointed at Barry as I said the last sentence. He made an angry face but made no move to get up from his chair. Tracy's eyes filled with tears, but she wasn't crying anymore. Her grip on my hand tightened. Please, Alan, was all she could say. I guess I was a fool to think you wouldn't throw away 13 years of marriage for a little extramarital night, I said. Perhaps my biggest disappointment was that you didn't even care enough about our children to protect them from the possible consequences of your actions. That's when the dam broke, and now Tracy was crying. I felt her nails digging into my arm. I pulled my hand away from Tracy's grip and stood up. The next move is yours, Tracy. It's 7:30, and I'm getting ready to go home. I'll give you until 8:30 to get home. I think an hour will be enough for you to say goodbye to Barry and get home by 8:30. But that's not enough time for everything else. If you're not home by 8:30, I'll consider our marriage over. For a moment, I thought about telling Tracy what I found out about Barry, but I knew she had to make a decision based on her feelings for me and not her feelings for Barry. After she found out how worthless he was, if she ultimately chooses him, she'll deserve whatever she gets. I don't want to waste any more of your time, I said. So, I'll get out of here. Maybe I'll see you at home, Tracy. I turned around and left. Along with the resentment and anger I felt proud of myself. I didn't lash out at Barry, raise my voice, or call Tracy names. I didn't say anything terribly offensive or something that couldn't be forgiven. I made my feelings clear, and the rest was up to Tracy. I had already reached the exit from the bar into the hotel lobby when I heard Tracy shout, "Alan, please don't leave now." I didn't stop. As I walked back to the garage of my office building to pick up my car, I analyzed everything I had said to Tracy and was convinced I had said most of what I wanted to say. I only wished I could have done something to Barry to make his life as miserable as he made mine. I knew that if I ever got the chance, I would pay him back for what he did. When you mess around with married women, you have to be prepared to get caught. I drove home slowly with the windows open, trying to remain calm. I turned on the radio and tried to sing along to a song to distract myself from thinking about Tracy and our marriage. The odds were 50-50 that Tracy would be home by 8:30, and I thought that was being generous. I arrived at the house at 10 minutes past 8 o'clock. Sarah was surprised to see me so early, but when she saw the look on my face, she didn't ask any questions. After thanking her, I paid her, after which she went home. Taking a beer out of the refrigerator, I took it into the living room and sat down to wait. I turned on the TV, but the lame comedy shows playing at that hour only made my misery worse, so I turned it off. I sat and tried not to think about anything, but nothing worked. The closer it got to 8:30, the more worried I became. My palms were sweaty again, and my stomach was cramping, but that didn't stop me from drinking a second bottle of beer. I was looking at the bottle of beer I held between my knees when I heard the grandfather clock in the dining room strike the half hour. Slowly standing up, I walked into the kitchen and poured the remaining beer from the bottle into the sink, leaving the empty bottle on the table. As I approached the front door of the house, I looked out the window and didn't see Tracy. Damn, I muttered to myself, then turned off all the lights and headed upstairs. I checked in with Matthew and Lisa before going to my room and getting ready for bed. As I climbed into bed, I thought about how much my life would change from now on. I turned off the light on my bedside table and pretended I really thought I could fall asleep. I had only been in bed for 5 minutes when I heard the front door open. I looked at my watch, although I already knew what time it was. She was 15 minutes late. What did this mean? Was it because she had such a hard time making the decision to return home rather than stay with him? Was it because she had such a hard time making the decision to return home rather than stay with him? Was it because she had to convince Barry that she would meet him another time, or because, like me, she was in no hurry to go home? I debated whether to go downstairs to talk to her or stay in bed and pretend to be asleep. It was only 8:45, and I knew she wouldn't believe I was going to bed so early. I waited a few more minutes, and when it became clear that she wasn't going to get up anytime soon, I got up and went to look for her. I needed to somehow resolve the situation this evening. Tracy was in the living room, sitting in the dark. I turned on the light as I walked to the kitchen. Taking 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator, I returned to the living room. I handed one of the bottles to Tracy. When she looked at me, her eyes were red, and her nose was running. I didn't say a word. I just went into the bathroom, grabbed a box of tissues, brought them back, and placed them on the coffee table in front of Tracy. "Thank you," Tracy said, almost in a whisper. "I think now it's your turn to talk, and it's my turn to listen," I said in as non-threatening a tone as possible. Tracy looked at me with her sad eyes. "Alan, I need you to do something for me before I try to explain all this to you," she said. "Why am I obligated to do you any favors?" I asked. "It's not a favor," she said. "I just need you to do it so you can believe what I tell you." I didn't like what she just said. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "I tried to call you at your office at 5 o'clock today, but you didn't answer. And when I tried to call you on your cell phone, you didn't answer either," she said. "Are you saying that what happened tonight happened because I didn't answer my phone?" I asked incredulously. In a way, yes, she said. But for you to understand that, you have to listen to the voicemail I left for you when I called at 5 o'clock. Please listen to this message, and then I will tell you everything you want to know. I looked into Tracy's eyes to see where this was going. All I could see was that her eyes were begging me to do what she asked. When I got up to go to the phone, I remembered that at 5 o'clock they called me, but I did not answer, and shortly after that, my cell phone rang, but I turned it off without even looking at who called. So maybe she was telling the truth about the phone calls, but how could I not answer the call to absolve her of what she planned to do to Barry? I turned to look at Tracy before leaving the room. She looked at her hands and seemed not to notice anything around her. Her phone message couldn't possibly explain why she dressed for her date with Barry. I picked up the kitchen phone and dialed the voicemail number, then entered my password. There were 3 messages for me, 2 were work-related and came after Tracy called at 5 o'clock. Here's the message she left for me. Alan, I thought you'd still be in the office. You said you were going to work late. Call me when you get this message. I'll try to reach you on your cell phone after I leave this message. I've been thinking a lot lately about what you were saying, and it occurred to me that I've been acting strangely towards you all this time. I didn't realize how stupid I was being until yesterday, when you challenged me about going to the party tonight. Date with friends. After thinking about what you said, I decided that you were right. Our marriage is more important than an evening with friends. I wish I had thought of this earlier. I told you that my friends and I planned this evening last week and I couldn't change anything. I decided that maybe you and I could compromise. I thought I could go out for drinks with the girls and then meet you at 8 o'clock at Anthony's for dinner. That way, we could have a romantic dinner and come home to Sarah by 10 o'clock so I can show you how much I love you. I'll keep trying to call you, but if I don't hear from you by 8 o'clock, I'll just go home. I'm going home now to change into something hot so you can't resist me. The only 2 words that came to mind were holy crap. She dressed like that for me, not for him. We still had some issues to resolve, but the bottom line was that she chose me over Barry. The situation was beginning to make sense. I walked back into the living room and sat down on the couch next to Tracy. I took her hand in mine and just looked into her eyes. I'm so sorry, Alan, she said. I don't know what I was thinking when I agreed to meet Barry for dinner. I knew you would never approve of my meeting with him, and that should have been enough for me to tell him no. You have to believe me when I say that I had no intention of sleeping with him. I thought we'd have dinner, talk about old friends, maybe dance, and then I'd go home. I thought I had everything under control. I really hated lying to you, so I couldn't look at you when we talked. I was sure that you would see right through me. Did you really think Barry was only interested in talking to you? No, and that's probably why I wanted to see him. I didn't want to have intimate with him, but I guess I liked the idea that he wanted me. I had a few more questions I wanted to ask Tracy, but at that moment, I really wanted to make love to her and tell her everything would be okay. I put my hands on either side of her face, pulled her towards me, and kissed her. Tracy answered. I stood up, took her hand, and said, let's go to bed and salvage what we can from our romantic evening. Earlier in the evening, you mentioned that I didn't talk to you but wanted intim. When we got into bed, I just want you to know that I didn't have any fantasies. I tried to show you that I love you. It was hard for me to look at you when we talked because I was afraid that you would see that I was hiding something from you. So I thought that in the dark, I could show you my feelings without looking into your eyes. Now I just want to make sure you know that I love you and that I didn't lie when I said I never intended to have a night with Barry. This should never have happened, Tracy said. Afterwards, as we lay in bed cuddled together, Tracy asked, do you want to talk about what happened? No, I think it's best if we just leave this behind, I said. A few minutes later, I fell into the best sleep I've had in 3 weeks. This morning, Tracy and I had breakfast together, and she stopped me at the door and kissed me. I love you, she said. I love you too. I felt good when I drove the car out of the driveway and went to work, but my good mood suddenly began to deteriorate, and I didn't understand why something was gnawing at me. But by the time I got to my office, some pieces of the puzzle had started to fall into place, and my mood had deteriorated even further. Tracy had decided to stay with me the night before, but looking back, I still couldn't figure out if it was because she loved me or maybe she just realized that I might know what was going on. She decided to meet me for dinner at 8 o'clock so that I would think that she had decided not to have an affair with Barry, and then went to meet Barry to arrange with him about the next visit. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't so, but I remembered all of Tracy's subtle hints that I knew what was going on. After all, I still didn't know why she agreed to meet him the first time. Additionally, during the phone call, he talked about how they danced and the kiss they shared. I was no longer confident that I had saved my marriage. Perhaps I only delayed its end. I was sitting at my desk, trying to do some work, when a small window appeared in the lower right corner with a message from foxmanxxx.com. It was 10:30 a.m., so I waited until lunch and then opened Tracy's email. I no longer had the patience to wait until 5 o'clock to find out what was in the note and see if Tracy responded to it. Barry's note read, Sorry about the confusion yesterday. How did he know you were going to meet me at the hotel bar anyway? I'll be back in Cincinnati in a month. Maybe we can try to meet then. I had to wait 10 minutes before I could bring myself to look at Tracy's response file to see if she responded and, if so, what she said. When my heart rate finally dropped back below 100, I opened Tracy's response file, and there was her response. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, hoping that if I waited a little longer, I might find some good news for me in her response to Barry. I can't say that it was my hesitation that helped, but the news was good. Tracy's response read, Barry, agreeing to meet with you was a big mistake, and I don't intend to repeat that mistake. I think I was able to save my marriage, and I don't want to put it at risk again. Don't try to contact me again, Tracy. I closed Tracy's email and sat back, feeling relieved again. The questions I had asked myself earlier remained unanswered, but I told Tracy I didn't want to talk about it and decided not to bring it up again. I will have to accept that I will never have the answers to these questions. Our life was gradually returning to normal. Tracy was the loving wife she always was, and her nightlife had improved too. But I was still plagued by unanswered questions. There were a few times I came close to bringing up Barry and why she agreed to meet him in the first place, but everything else was going so well that I was afraid of ruining it. Even though I didn't see anything that indicated problems in our marriage, I continued to check Tracy's email and listen to her phone calls. On several occasions when Tracy called and said she would have to work late, I would drive by her office to make sure her car was in the parking lot and then call her office to make sure she was there. By mid-September, I began to realize that I was being stupid. I spent many hours going over everything that happened in my head, and one thing became clear to me: Tracy never stopped loving me. I still didn't know why she agreed to meet Barry that night, but I knew it was time to put it behind and move on. So I decided to stop spying on Tracy and trust her. Making this decision felt like a big weight had been lifted from my chest, but that feeling was short-lived. It all started on a Saturday afternoon when I walked into the house after mowing the lawn and heard Tracy talking on the phone. I didn't hear anything special, but I heard her say, "He just arrived. I need to go." Then she hung up. "Who spoke on the phone?" I asked. "My mother." "What did she want?" "She just wanted to talk," Tracy said. Something in Tracy's voice told me she wasn't telling the truth, but I had no good reason to dispute her words. On Monday, when I checked her email, there were no new entries, and she had deleted all the old ones. That week, I checked her email several times, but there were no new letters. I began to suspect that Tracy must have opened a new email account, but I had no way of finding out. The following week, Tracy began to behave in the same way as in the period leading up to her date with Barry. She didn't talk to me much, and when she did, she didn't look at me. Then at night, when we went to bed, she wanted to have an intimate. Was she planning on seeing Barry again, or could it be a new man? Could it be that the excitement she got from her intimate affair with Barry has whetted her appetite for romance, and now she's found another man? I felt the same pain in my stomach and lost sleep again. The following weekend, Jill, Frank, and their son Frank Jr. came to visit and went to the Reds game with us. They stayed for the weekend. We had a great time with them, and I hoped it would help Tracy and me. Saturday night, we were all sitting in the backyard drinking beer and grilling steaks. Tracy, Jill, and Frank were talking about old friends when Frank brought up the topic of Barry Fox. He asked Tracy if she had reached Barry's wife, Karen. When Tracy said no, Frank told her the whole story about how Karen divorced Barry for having multiple affairs and how he had girlfriends in different cities. Then he went into detail about how Barry was faking business trips to visit his girlfriends. I could not believe it. Frank told Tracy the truth about Barry, and I didn't even mention his name. I thought that if Tracy was thinking about getting back together with Barry, maybe she'd change her mind after hearing the story about Barry from Frank. Now she had to find out what kind of person he really was. Tracy's expression didn't change, so I couldn't tell how the news affected her. She didn't ask any questions, so I couldn't figure out what she was thinking. Did this upset her, or did she not care anymore? Although I didn't know how she felt about the news, I was glad Frank brought it up. The situation was resolved. In October, my birthday is October 11th, which falls on the second Friday of the month. In years past, Tracy would spend weeks trying to get me to give her hints about what I wanted for my birthday. This year, she didn't even ask once. By Thursday, Tracy wasn't even talking to me anymore. It felt like our marriage was already over, but someone forgot to tell me. Friday morning, I got up early and left for work before Tracy got up. I tried not to get distracted, but my heart was broken. I couldn't understand how everything could be so good for us and suddenly turn out so bad. By 11 o'clock in the morning, I still hadn't gotten anything done and was thinking about taking the day off as a sick day. I had not yet decided whether to go home or not when I received the call. Jack Ferris, Jack is my boss. He said that our Lexington office was having network problems and he wanted me to go there to fix the problem. Can Tom cope with the problem? I asked. Tom Mosley was the network manager in the Lexington office. Tom is on vacation today, Jack said. The Lexington office was 85 miles away, and I arrived there around 1:30 p.m. When I walked in the door, they told me they had just restored the network. I was a little pissed off that I had come all the way to Lexington for nothing. Apparently, Tom Mosley called from home and was able to fix the problem over the phone. Brian Cadwell, the office manager, apologized for the inconvenience and then invited me to go across the street to Starbucks for a cup of coffee before heading back to Cincinnati. I returned to my office at 4:15 p.m. There were 2 report requests on my desk with a note from Jack asking me to collect the data for the reports and complete them before I went home. I was upset that he assigned me this late on a Friday night after sending me to Lexington. To hell, I told myself. I had nowhere to go anyway, and the idea of rushing home to a wife who wouldn't even talk to me wasn't very appealing. So having something to occupy my time was something of a blessing. I was about to start working on my reports when I saw the message light on my phone blink. When I dialed the voicemail number, I received one message. A message was left for me at 1:30 that day and was from Tracy. Alan, I'm going out with some girls from work tonight. I might be late, so don't wait for me. I asked Sarah to come over before you get home, but don't be late with the girls. Who is she trying to fool? Then I thought that maybe she wasn't trying to deceive me. Maybe she's made it clear that she has something going on and doesn't care if I know about it. I picked up the phone and called Tracy's office, but they told me that Tracy had already left for the day. After calling home, Sarah answered the phone and said that Tracy had already left. Did she say where she was going? I asked. No. How was she dressed? Sarah said. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. This didn't tell me anything. I called Tracy's cell phone, but she didn't answer. Then I left her a message asking her to call me, but I didn't have much hope that she would call. I wondered if there was any meaning to Tracy doing this to me on my birthday. This time, there was nothing I could do to stop her. I had no idea where she went, and if she didn't answer the phone, there was nothing more I could do. It occurred to me that maybe I shouldn't have interfered with Tracy when she was on a date with Barry. If I had just let her go, the affair might have been behind us, and instead of going through that pain again, I would have already started rebuilding my life. I tried to put it all out of my head and started collecting data for reports. At 6:15, I was finishing up my second report when my phone rang. Alan, yes, this is Jackie Winters, Jackie said. Hi, Jackie, how are you? I asked. Alan, I don't know what's going on, and maybe it's none of my business, but I thought I should try to get through to you. The tone of Jackie's voice alarmed me. Jackie, what happened? I asked. I was getting ready to go home at 5:30 and was standing in my office when I saw Tracy go into the hotel and check in. Did you know she rented a room here for the night? Jackie asked. No, I didn't know. Is the room in her name? I asked. Yes, and she left a note for someone on the table. Can you tell me who the note was for and what was written in it? I asked. You always seem to ask me for information that I shouldn't give you. Why don't you just come? We'll talk when you arrive. Thank you, Jackie. I'll be there in a few minutes. I quickly finished the second report, put both reports in internal mail, and sent them to Jack. I then took the 10-minute walk to the Marriott Hotel. When I walked up to the front desk, I asked for Jackie Winters, and about 2 minutes later, she came out of the office. Jackie led me to the sofa in the hall, and we sat down. I'm sorry that I have to be the one to tell you this, she said. You have to promise me that you won't do anything stupid. I just need to know who she left the note for, and then I need to talk to her. The note was addressed to someone named John, no last name. Inside the envelope was a key card to her room and a note saying, I'm in room 706. Come in, John. I have no idea who it could be. Has anyone picked up the note yet? I asked. No, and no one can, Jackie said. The note is in my pocket. I'm going to give you the key card to room 706 so you can go up and talk to Tracy before this John guy shows up. I instructed the receptionist to call the room if he shows up while you're talking to Tracy. Now, you have to promise not to do anything stupid. Remember, I'm taking a risk by giving you the key to her room, and if there's a problem, I could lose my job. Jackie, I promise I won't do anything that will get you in trouble. I just need to talk to Tracy and see if I can stop her from doing what she's up to, I said. Thank you, Jackie. I am very grateful to you for this and will not forget that you helped me. I took the key card from Jackie and headed towards the elevators. The ride to the 7th floor was the longest, or should I say shortest, elevator ride I've ever been on. A part of me wanted to get to Tracy's room as quickly as possible and end this confrontation, but another part of me was dreading this confrontation because I was afraid that this meeting could very well mean the end of our marriage. When I approached the door to 706, I stopped for a minute and listened. I heard the sound of the TV but nothing else. Taking a deep breath, I reached out to insert the key card into the reader. My hand was shaking so much that I had to use both hands to insert the card into the reader. The light on the reader turned red, and I quickly pulled out the card and double-checked the room number. It seemed right, and then I realized that I had inserted the key card into the reader upside down. I turned the card over and inserted it again. This time, the indicator turned green. I pulled out the card, opened the door as quietly as possible, and stepped into the room. Along the wall to the left of the door was a closet with sliding mirror doors. One door was partially open, and I saw a suitcase on the floor inside the closet. When I saw the suitcase, I felt sad because it showed that Tracy had no intention of returning home that night. I wondered if she even planned to return home. To my right was the bathroom door, which was closed. A quick glance at the reflection in the mirror doors showed me that there was no one in the bedroom. I heard the water running in the bathroom, so I knew where Tracy was. It's good that you're here, she called. I just got out of the shower. There is some beer in the ice bucket on the table. Help yourself, and I'll be out in a few minutes. My first instinct was to rush into the bathroom, grab Tracy by the throat, and ask why she was doing this to me, to us. But I didn't dare allow myself to react with violence. Nothing good would come of this, plus I was interested to see how Tracy would be dressed when she came out of the bathroom. Would she be without clothes or fully clothed? It seemed to me that if she was without anything or in a nicely negligee when she came out of the bathroom, then it most likely meant that this was not the first time she had been with this John. But if she was fully clothed, then perhaps it would be their first time together. I walked into the bedroom, took a beer from the ice bucket, sat down in the chair next to the table, and stared at the TV, not knowing what I was watching. I had finished about half of my beer when I heard the bathroom door open. Tracy walked out of the bathroom and headed towards the closet without even glancing in my direction. Unfortunately, I was not in the mood to fully appreciate this view. Tracy was still leaned over looking at her suitcase when she spoke. Our dinner reservation is for 7:30, so if you want, we have time to fool around a little, she said. I stood up and started walking towards her. I wanted to be close enough to her when she realized it was me and not her lover in the room, so I could see the surprise and then the fear in her eyes. When I was already a meter away from her, I called, "Tracy." Tracy straightened up and quickly turned to face me. When she turned around, I saw that she was holding something in her hand. But when she turned to face me, she hid it behind her back. Taking another step forward, I looked into her eyes. I waited for her face to show the fear I knew she must have felt at that moment. But instead of showing fear, Tracy smiled at me. I wasn't ready for this and couldn't speak, wondering what it might mean. Did Tracy really care that I caught her? She had to know that I would never hit her, and now she was going to humiliate me by confronting me with the fact that she was waiting for another man in a hotel room. She didn't even seem interested in how I knew she would be there. Alan, I expected, no, hoped, that after a few seconds, her initial reaction would change. But this did not happen. She just continued to smile at me. I couldn't believe how calmly she handled the situation. She never broke eye contact with me, and I still couldn't find the words to express my hurt. I tried to think of something I could say that would give me an edge in this confrontation. But before I could think of anything, Tracy surprised me again. She took her hand from behind her back and handed me a large blue envelope with my name printed on it in large letters. I stood and looked at Tracy in mute silence, unable to utter a word. "Happy birthday, darling," Tracy said and kissed me tenderly on the lips. Suddenly, my legs became weak, and I had to walk backwards to the bed and sit down. "What is this?" I stammered. "What's going on here?" "There are actually two things going on here," Tracy said. "First of all, this is your punishment for spying on me, listening to my phone calls, reading my email, and generally not trusting me. Secondly, and most importantly, this is a surprise for your birthday, and I bet you're really surprised." I don't know what to say. "Wait a minute, this is your idea of revenge? I spied on you a bit, and you decided to get revenge by having an affair with some guy named John on my birthday?" I asked. "Who is John?" Tracy asked. "You left a note for a guy named John at the front desk with the room number and key, so don't try to pretend to be innocent." "Who the hell is John?" I said. "I don't know who John is," she said. "Are you trying to tell me that you didn't arrange to meet some guy here tonight?" I asked. "No, I'm not trying to tell you that. You were right. I actually agreed to meet a guy here tonight. I agreed to meet the man I love, the most important man in my life," she said. I started to feel dizzy. Did she put something in my beer? I really didn't think she could do something like that. I understood that the problem was that she had the upper hand in this confrontation, and I was unsuccessfully trying to win her back. "So when will he come?" I asked. "He's already here, silly." "Who's already here?" "You, the person I love, the one who matters most to me." "Haven't you realized this yet?" she said. The realization of what she was telling me began to sink in, but I was still confused. "Okay then, who is John?" I asked again. "There is no John. John is just the name Jackie wrote on the envelope for me," Tracy said. "Was Jackie involved in this too?" "I needed someone to get you to come here without giving away what I was up to," she said. I didn't know what name Jackie would write on the envelope. I left it up to her because the name didn't matter as long as it wasn't Barry. I thought about using the name Barry, but I realized that would be too cruel, and I thought it might make you look too crazy. Now all this began to clear up in my head. I was tricked. How many other people were involved in this? "Your boss," Tracy began. "I needed him to keep you busy so you wouldn't get my voicemail until it was too late for you to do anything. Sarah, because I needed her to explain what she should have told you if you called or showed up at home. Your parents, because they had to come home to pick up the kids for the weekend. There were a few other people who played minor roles, like the office manager in Lexington, who told you that their network was back up right before you arrived and then made you stay for a while before heading back to Cincinnati. Did you do all this to punish me for spying on you a little?" I asked. "You've been driving me crazy for the last 3 weeks, and then you say it was your birthday present to me? On top of that, you dragged my family and friends into this. My behavior may have been out of line, but that's too much, Tracy. It was just cruel. Jackie is the only one who knows the whole story. The others only thought they were helping me surprise you on your birthday. It shouldn't have been this way. Originally, your birthday and this revenge, if you want to call it that, were supposed to be two different things, she said. When I realized that you were listening in on my phone conversations and discovered that you were reading my email, I was hurt and upset that you didn't trust me. Then you started checking on me at work. If I had to work overtime, I know I put doubts in your head about me. But if you had just sat down with me and talked about what happened with Barry and why, and asked any questions that were bothering you right after it happened, I could have calmed you down. You refused to discuss it and allowed these doubts to eat away at you, causing yourself to not trust me. So, I started acting the way I did before the Barry incident, thinking that once you noticed my behavior, you would ask me about it and we would finally talk about what we should have talked about 3 months ago. I had been planning this weekend for your birthday alone for over a month, she continued. But when instead of questioning my suspicious behavior, you decided to step up your surveillance, I stepped up my plan to teach you a lesson. I wasn't planning on going that far until Jill and Frank came to visit. I was dizzy with relief when I learned that Tracy had no intention of having an affair, and with anger at the cruel trick she played on me. What did their visit have to do with this? I asked. It was obvious that you thought my behavior meant I was planning to get together with Barry, she said. Why did you decide so? I asked. It was obvious that you talked Frank into telling you about Barry. You made him tell the story about Barry's divorce and all his girlfriends. You talked Frank into showing Barry's character because you were afraid I was planning to get together with him. Even after I told you that I never had any intention of having an affair with Barry, you still didn't believe me. I could almost forgive you for that, but when you brought Frank into our problem and used him to tell all these stories about Barry, it was too much. You couldn't trust me enough to know that I wouldn't let myself be seduced by Barry, so you tried to make him look like a real creep to make sure I'd lose interest in him, and you used my friends to do it. I raised my hand to stop her. Now I was prepared enough to defend myself. Just 1 damn minute, I said. First of all, regarding whether Barry is a creep or not, think about this. What do you call a man who tries to get a married woman to come into a hotel room with him knowing that he could ruin that woman's marriage? I'd call him a scumbag, wouldn't you? It makes me wonder what you were thinking. You knew he was married, and you agreed to meet him that evening anyway. I saw Tracy's expression change as she thought about it. Second, and more importantly, I said, I didn't ask Frank to tell you about Barry. Frank knows nothing about what happened that evening. Then why did he talk about it back in June when I was trying to figure out a way to stop you from meeting Barry when he came to town? I said. I called Frank and asked if he knew Barry's phone number. Then I told him that you wanted to call his wife Karen because you missed her when we were in Pusa. I was planning on calling Karen and telling her that Barry tried to get you to meet him at the hotel. I thought she could put an end to this. Then Frank told me that Karen had divorced him and why, and then he told me that Barry had girlfriends in different cities and that he pretended to be traveling on business to visit these women. Frank only brought this up because I told him you were interested in getting in touch with Karen. Tracy's eyes grew even larger. Why didn't you tell me all this before I met Barry that evening? She asked. I wanted you to decide what you would do based on your feelings for me, I said. I didn't want you to stay just because you found out at the last minute that Barry was, in fact, just and Tracy came and sat next to me on the bed and ran her fingers through my hair. Let's do it now, she said. I know you have questions that are bothering you, so ask them now. I think it all goes back to that evening when Barry called you, and I overheard the conversation. He made a comment about the way you danced as if it mattered, I said. I think it meant something to him, Tracy said. I felt pretty good after the drink, and it was fun talking about old times with Barry. Then he asked me to dance, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. But when the orchestra started playing a slow number, he pulled me towards him. At first, I didn't think anything about it. He began to get too familiar. I stopped him but didn't push him away. When we continued the dance, why didn't you tell him on the phone that night that you didn't like what he was trying to do? Because I didn't think it was important, so why make him feel bad, she said. I told him it was inappropriate and only happened because I was drunk. What about a kiss? Tracy suddenly kissed me on the lips, just an ordinary kiss. That's exactly how I kissed him. I told Barry I needed to get back to you and quickly kissed him goodbye. He was just trying to make it seem more important than it actually was, hoping to make me believe it. If you knew that, then you should have understood what he wanted when he asked you to meet him in Cincinnati. When you agreed to meet him, you said it would just be dinner and conversation, and then added that he shouldn't expect anything more. Telling him not to expect more is not the same as telling him there won't be anything more. You left him with the feeling that he still had a chance to get into your pants. Why did you do this? I asked. Why did you agree to meet him? I don't know why it was so important to me. Of course, I knew what he wanted, and I was flattered that he was interested in me, but not enough to start an affair with him. Barry was my first, and for most of that time, we were intimate. The night was exciting because it was new to me, but Barry was a narcissistic egomaniac, and by the end of the summer, I realized I didn't love him and broke up with him. Barry kept saying that I would get back to him and that the breakup was temporary. He told me that I would always want him intimately because he was my first lover and women never forget their first lover. In one of his emails, Barry said that we should check if there is some kind of magic between us. I felt challenged by him. He said that if we were together, I would not be able to resist him. The way he said we'd have dinner and talk and then see what happens made me want to show him he was wrong about me. I wanted to show him that there is no magic between us. I wanted to show him that I could spend the evening with him and not go to bed with him. I guess I was so focused on the need to prove him wrong that I forgot about what was most important in my life, about you and the children. I started to ask another question, but Tracy stopped me. It's 7:15, and we have dinner booked for 7:30, and you still need to change. We can continue this conversation later. Okay, but what should I change into? My loving husband, I already am, but I didn't bring a change of clothes with me. After all, I didn't know I should have, I said. I brought clothes for you. They're in the closet. Hurry up and get ready. I quickly washed my face and put on gray trousers with a dark blazer. When I came out of the bathroom, Tracy was talking on the phone. Yes, we are going to dinner. Thank you very much for your help, she said. Who was that? I just wanted to call Jackie and tell her everything went well. It worked out, didn't it? I guess so, but I still think your trick on me was too cruel, I said. Perhaps you were right, and I am very sorry. If I had known, you didn't put Frank up to telling those stories about Barry. I would have made sure to end it last week. Tracy kissed me, and then we headed to the elevator. Tracy spoke as we walked. I am serious about answering all your questions about what happened. I just hope you learned a lesson from this. If you think something is wrong, talk to me about it. You understand that if you had told me that you heard that first phone call, then everything would have ended there. This doesn't mean it's all your fault, but the fact that you have this information and don't act on it surprises me. You are usually very proactive. In hindsight, I realized she was right. But you're right, I said. I should have acted immediately, but the situation was so emotionally charged that I had trouble thinking clearly. The point is that regardless of the reasons, you should not have agreed to meet him that evening. As we exited the elevator into the lobby, I stopped. Tracy put her hands on my shoulders, and I turned to face her. We both screwed up big time. Let's leave this in the past now, I said. Tracy didn't say anything. She just took my hand, and we started walking towards the restaurant. Suddenly, Tracy stopped and pulled me in the other direction. We may be a few minutes late. In one of the meeting rooms down the hall, there's something I'd like you to see, she said. For example, there's a special sale on golf equipment. I thought you might find something there that I could give you for your birthday to make up for the lousy trick I pulled on you. We walked down the hallway to the room Tracy was looking for, but the door was closed. Looks like we're late, I said. I hear there are people there. Try to open the door, Tracy said. The door wasn't locked, and as soon as it opened, Tracy pushed me into the room. I thought she was crazy. When I turned to look at her, I realized there were a lot of people in the room. Before I could grasp what was happening, I heard a loud chorus of surprise. Happy birthday! I was stunned. Looking around, I saw my parents, Tracy's parents, Matthew and Lisa, Jackie and her husband, my boss, and a few of our friends. When I looked back at Tracy, she was smiling brightly. She kissed me and said, "Happy birthday, dear." I spent the next 20 minutes walking around the room, greeting my friends, thanking them for coming and agreeing with them that I was lucky to have a wife like Tracy. Finally, we sat down at the table with Matthew, Lisa, and our parents. My father raised his glass of wine and said, "Happy birthday, son," and everyone at the table clinked their glasses together, even Matthew and Lisa, and then drank. Tracy took just a small sip of wine, then turned to me, ran her fingers through my hair, leaned down, and gently kissed me on the cheek, right next to my ear. "I hope you know how much I love you," she whispered. "I have another surprise for you. I'm pregnant." I turned to look at her beaming face. "Is it true?" I asked. Tracy simply nodded. I took her face in my hands and kissed her deeply on the lips. "I take it you're happy?" she asked. "This is a much better gift than those golf clubs. What do you think of our story today?" In my opinion, longtime friends or longtime ex-boyfriends of a girl should not be present in their real life because it can have a bad effect on the girls' lives, as it happened in this story. What is your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.